Bere Suanu Kingston invites us to his house in Oakland, California, on a cold and cloudy summer day. Bere's daughter, a tall, quietly self-possessed teenager, greets us. She calls for Bere, and he soon emerges from the long hallway. He leads us through the dark corridors of his multi-story home, giving us a tour, and in the process, introducing us to his two sisters who live with him. One of whom has a new baby in her arms. He leads us down to the basement level and into his son's room where, he says, we will not be disturbed during the interview. We speak about his childhood in Ogoniland, a region of about 1,000 square kilometers in the Niger River Delta in the southeast of Nigeria, where the Ogoni people have lived for the past 5,000 years. Shell and Chevron and other oil companies have been extracting oil in Ogoniland since the 1950s, establishing a large, modern plant. At one point, Bere turns off his phone as he begins to describe his involvement with the Ogoni resistance movement and Ogoni demands for a small share of oil revenues. He shifts his position as we speak, often kneeling on the floor with his hands folded in prayer over his son's tiger print bedspread. But of his political activism, Bere was arrested and tortured and narrowly escaped execution by the Nigerian military. As he recounts his experience, his voice falls to a whisper. I was born April 22, 1966, in Kabanga, a village in Ogoniland by the Niger River in Nigeria. Ogoni is a flat land. Some people live in the mountains. Some people live in the swamp. Some people live near the ocean. But we Ogoni are in the flatland. We don't have hills, mountains, or even rocks. We don't have hills, mountains, or even rocks. And we don't have the sea. But there are many rivers going through Ogoniland. So it's almost as if we're by the sea. Ogoni is one tribe, but it is made up of many different areas and different groups. There's almost 1 million of us now. We have a similar language, but we speak different dialects. What brings us together is a similar ancestry. We come from the same people. Ogoniland is peaceful. We plant cassava, yam, cocoa, plantain. There are palm trees too. We use red palms for oil and big white palms to make palm wine. The village where I'm from, Kabanga, is big. It's almost a city. When I left in 1996, we had about 2,000 people in the village. Now we have around 5,000 people. In Kabanga, as a child, we had a green apple tree in the town square. The tree was for everyone. After school, we would hang out by the tree, and when an apple fell, we would race to it. Whoever could grab the apple could keep it. Now, sometimes we stole apples from the tree, but we'd be whipped if caught by the grown-ups, because you weren't supposed to pick the apples straight from the tree. The apples were for everyone in the village. If children picked as many apples as they wanted, there'd soon be none left. The same tree is still there in town square today, generation to generation. It stayed there. So we would go to the apple tree and wait for an apple to fall, or go to the school grounds to play soccer, and this is how we kept busy. In our village, we had sand floors in the schools. We sat on the ground. There were no chairs or desks. My dad was a teacher who became a headmaster, and from headmaster, he became supervisor. My mother was also a teacher, 5 wives and 23 children. My mom had 7 kids, and she would prepare meals for the 7 of us. In the morning, we ate fufu. We'd have fufu with soup made with vegetables like okra. Sometimes we'd also cook rice or beans. And we had a lot of fish because we were close to the river. My mom would often cook for more than just us 7 kids, because she entertained a lot of people. The house was always open. I see over here in the U.S., people don't always ask, do you want a drink? When you come to their house. But in my culture, when you go to someone's house, the first thing is that you offer a cup of water. They offer you food, because it's like welcoming you. Shell Oil actually started drilling in Ogoniland a few years before I was born, but I remember seeing them move into Kabanga. Surveyors and heavy equipment would come in, and we'd hear the sounds, loud machine noises. First one truck, then many noises. First one truck, then many. When I was a child, there was not too much awareness of what oil companies were doing. When people first heard that Shell was coming to our land, we just expected to meet some white people. We thought of them as interesting visitors. Oh, Shell is coming here today. They are coming to see our land. We were so excited. Then after they started drilling, we'd see light from the gas flares at night. And at first we were excited about that as well. Look, there is a light. There is a light. When I was growing up, we would go to the river to swim and fish, and bathe and play. We also drank from the river. We didn't have tap. And it was really safe, because anything that flows from the rainy seasons goes into the water. Dead things end up in the river, as well as the runoff from clothes, washing, and bathing. And even when I was young, we were already seeing oil runoff in the river. The river was oily and black, and we had no idea what to do when we saw the water was polluted with oil. When my grandmother and my mom saw the river, they just said, "What is this?" To drink, we'd push aside the oil on the surface and then scoop up the water. Fish were dying, though when I was younger, we didn't connect that with the oil. We didn't know that pollution was killing our fish, killing our trees, contaminating our water, making us sick. Some people even intentionally drank the crude oil because they said it would help their immune systems, clean out some bacteria and some stuff like that. I remember once when an oil pipe broke and the oil spilled out all over the land. Some people took some home to try out as cooking oil. So Shell was all around us, building new roads and bringing in big machines to drill. But our villages remained the same. No plumbing, no electricity, no hospital, no jobs. At the same time, the land and water we needed to support ourselves were becoming toxic. The problem was, in Nigeria, we were a minority. The government didn't care about how we survived. They didn't care about our rivers, about how we grew our food. The government cared about oil. They didn't care about us. When I was about 9 years old, my family moved from Kabanga to Bore, the capital of the Orgoni region. We stayed in the city, and when I started my secondary school at age 10, I would go to a nearby village called Lumene. There were no buses to Lumene. I had to walk 5 to 10 miles to get to school. At 4 or 5 a.m., I'd wake up when it was still dark and I'd start to walk. The land was a mixture of clay and sand, and in the summer it was hot. It hurt my feet to walk, even with sandals or shoes. When it was rainy season, it was even more difficult. I had to hold a giant cocoyam leaf over my head to try to keep from getting wet, and I had to squeeze water out of my shoes when I arrived. Since it was such a long walk, my family decided I should move to Lumene. So I lived with a group of students. 5 of us children lived in one room together. There, I learned to cook for myself, fetch water from the river, clear the bush around the compound, do my homework. Being on your own teaches you how to deal with these things in life. So I went to school in Lumene, and after graduating, I'd stay for a while in my home village, Kabanga. I came back and sold things. Rice and beans, spices, clothes, paper, whatever I could find. I would go to different villages and buy at the big markets and then take big loads on top of my bicycle. Then I came back to Bore for my bachelor's degree in business administration. It was around 1987 and I was 21. That was the same year my first son was born. My son's mother and I didn't. It was at university that I learned the truth about Shell Oil. I can remember the exact moment I became fully aware of what the government of Nigeria was allowing Shell to do on our land. It was 1990, and I was 24. I'd already heard a little about oil companies in Ogoniland on the news, but that year, Ken Saro-Wiwa spoke to us about it openly. He came to address the whole Ogoni people. There were 2,000 of us in the crowd, in Bore, on the campus of a grammar school. The crowd was gathered in the school's play yard, its soccer field, and everyone was on their feet. We have 6 separate groups among the Ogoni people, and Ken Saro-Wiwa addressed all of us together. He told us that for almost 50 years, Shell Oil had been taking this oil from our land without paying revenue. He said, Now we want to let the government know that there is a lot of pollution in our homeland and that they are destroying our land, our fish, and our waters. We need the government and the oil companies to help our people build hospitals, colleges, and roads to provide clean water and pay revenue for what they're taking from us. Afterward, we danced in the field like it was a festival. And then he told us to go home and get prepared. That's when I got involved. I started talking to people at the college in Bere I was attending. Then I started going to villages and rural areas. I became a spokesman because I'm good at speaking in public. I don't get shy or scared. I would go to village and visit schools to teach the students about the problems that oil companies were bringing to our land. I let other Ogoni students know what I heard from Ken Saro-Wiwa. It was hard work. Ken started going from place to place, giving talks, and people like me would help carry the news to all the people of Ogoniland. People wouldn't always believe and embrace the truth in one day after one speech. People didn't see a reason to stand up to their own government. To convince some people, it takes a long time and a lot of voices. People listened to me, though, because they knew what I was saying was from the heart. In 1990, the Ogoni people presented a Bill of Rights to the federal government that had been written by Saro-Wiwa and other leaders of the Ogoni. The Bill of Rights was essentially a list of demands. First, we demanded more autonomy over our political affairs in Ogoniland because the Nigerian government had failed the Ogoni people. We wanted control over how our land was used, how our water was used, everything. The second demand was to use some of the oil revenue from our land to build roads, electric lines, hospitals, schools, all the necessary amenities to help the people live healthy lives. Third, we wanted adequate and direct representation of Ogoni people at the national level. The fourth demand was the official recognition of Ogoni languages. The fifth demand was the full recognition of our distinct culture. The sixth right was the right of religious freedom. Maybe 90% of us are Christian, but the Muslim majority in the country want to, dominate every area. We were saying, don't force me to be a Christian. Don't force me to be a Muslim or a Buddhist. And the seventh right, the right to protect the environment in Ogoniland for all creatures from further degradation. What the Ogoni people were demanding was to have a stronger voice in how our land was used, who profited from it, and to have our people recognized as having a right to not be squeezed out. Because in my village, we were dying of cancer, of other illnesses, because of the pollution. We didn't have anyone who was older than 80 years. And even young people of 20, 28 were dying from asthma, cancer, different things. We were dying so that others could profit. Our first major action was to present our Bill of Rights to the Nigerian government, but that didn't lead to any changes. The government ignored us. Later that year, the Bill of Rights was amended to formally announce MOSOP, the organized Ogoni movement started by Saro-Wiwa. The Ogoni people decided we needed to remain active and organized to stand against Shell and other oil companies, as well as the Nigerian government, which was not on our side. There was violence early on, and Saro-Wiwa was arrested and released from the formation of MOSOP. By December of 1992, MOSOP was making demands directly to the oil companies. We demanded that they halt all operations until our Bill of Rights was addressed by the Nigerian government. Then, on January 4, 1993, we had the first ever Ogoni Day, a huge peaceful protest of over 300,000 Ogoni. It was in Bere, the capital of Ogoniland, and all the people from friendly villages came to town, and we made a sort of declaration of independence. Different tribes came and brought with them their different cultures, different clothes, games, dances. We were singing, chanting the Ogoni language, Ogoni music, Ogoni songs. The Ogoni people appealed to the international community to let the world know what the government of Nigeria was doing to us. The point we were making that day was, we are Nigerian, we need development, we need education, we need the government to recognize that we are part of Nigeria. If they take something from us, we need something in return. We need to stop the violence. We need recognition. That was our message to Shell and the government of Nigeria. In April or May of 1993, the government and Shell wanted to lay a pipeline from Ogoniland to the northern part of Nigeria. The pipeline was cutting right through Ogoni farmlands. So on April 30th of that year, many Ogoni gathered for a peaceful demonstration to demand that the pipeline be stopped. The surveyors for the American company that were going to lay the pipeline came, and they also came with soldiers, the Nigerian military, and the Nigerian military opened fire. 10 people were hurt. And I remember seeing a man killed at a protest a few days later near a town called Nonwa. Those of us who were there, we stood and said no. A leader of our group said, "We came over here to tell you, you guys cannot come over and take this oil until the government has solved our differences and responded to the things we demanded." There was a person who was peacefully standing up on the pipeline, and the soldiers, the military that were there, they shot him. I remember seeing him get hit, and every one of us who were protesting went running for the bushes to escape. Between 1993 and 1994, there were many protests on Ogoniland. Shell halted some of its oil production in response, but for the Ogoni people, things just got worse. There was a lot of violence from the Nigerian government. Many people were getting arrested. Then, on May 21st, 1994, an incident occurred where 4 Ogoni chiefs were found murdered. The Nigerian government immediately blamed the murders on Mosop and Sarawiwa, even though the chiefs were closely allied with him. The next day, May 22nd, a security task force was sent into Ogoniland to arrest everyone associated with Mosop, claiming that they were searching for the killers. I was arrested in Bere on the 22nd day of May, along with many others. Close to midnight, they sent some troops with guns, and they knocked on each person's house and surrounded the house. If you tried to escape, they shot you. I later heard they shot 6 people that day, and they arrested Ken Sarawiwa and the leaders of Mosop and charged them with the murders of the Ogoni chiefs. In my case, they knocked at midnight. I was sleeping, and I woke up, and I heard people shouting, "Run, run, run, escape, 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 now." But before I could get up and dress myself, they had surrounded my house. I was arrested and thrown into a truck with other Ogoni. All of us who had been arrested were taken in a big truck to the camp. We were thrown together in a large crowd, almost 200 people in a hole in the ground, sort of a well with a locked grate on top. We only had room to lie down on the floor. We didn't have space to move. To visit the bathroom, we had to be taken out of the hole in chains. Then, early in the morning, they would take us out. They made us start jumping, hopping like frogs. They would make us do all sorts of things to humiliate us. They would make you hop for half a mile down the road while holding your ears, or they might say, "Everybody crawl on the ground," and you'd have to crawl back and forth on the road until they allowed you to stop. And they would beat us. They'd whip us with baseball bat or metal cane. Some people died. You know what they did to me? They drove a nail into my anus. I still have a scar on my anus. They did all this to make us confess our political activities. You confess, and then they make you promise you will not join Mosop again. After 2 months, my family and some local chiefs were able to bail me out. I was still a student, and the head of my department and my instructor, they came to me, and when I was released, I joined Mosop again. Things did not get better for us in Ogoniland. In the fall of 1995, Ken Sarawiwa and 8 other leaders of the Ogoni people were sentenced to death. They were killed in November of that year, and the Nigerian government continued to crack down on the Ogoni. The second time I was arrested, the military caught me on the way to school. they took me to a second camp in a military truck. On that truck, they were beating me with their guns and boots, smashing my head, hitting me with a baseball bat. A lot of people were beating me at once. I was thinking, either you die or you survive. The only thing is just to pray to God. Your only solution is just for God to help you. When you're in the truck, you pray. You have to pray. Then, when we were in camp, they tortured me to make me promise that I would not join Mossop again. They said they would cut off my legs and my hands. They had a knife. They had a gun. They had the tools to do anything they wanted to a human being. But I escaped from the camp. One of the soldiers escorted me to the bathroom and said, "I want you to escape because they want to kill you." He unlocked the chains and I said to the soldier, "Thank you," and then I ran. After my escape, I stayed in the bush for a couple of months with other people who were running from the military. In the bush, we survived off oranges and other things we could forage. Eventually, someone passing through our group mentioned that many Ogoni were fleeing to Benin Republic and seeking asylum there. It takes 2 days to get from Ogoni land to Benin by car, so there was no real way to do it on foot. So I snuck back home to get a little money for the journey, and there I met up with my sister, Blessing, who wanted to make the trip with me. We traveled any way we could, by bus, hitching rides to Lagos, and then from Lagos to Benin Republic. That's how I ended up in a refugee camp. It was early 1996 when I made it to Benin. I told the authorities there I had been arrested for political activity in Nigeria, and they took me and my sister to a refugee camp. Other Ogoni people were there, as well as some refugees from Togo, Congo, and other neighboring countries. There were maybe 800 of us, or more. We lived there in a tent for 2 years. Each, they would give us 10 cups of rice and 10 cups of beans, as well as 2 fish, 4 small cans of tomatoes, and 1 little bottle of peanut oil. We thought, God, the kind of food they give us, we can finish in 1 week, 1 day. We were always hungry. We would go into the bush and look for food we could find. Then in 1998, the United Nations opened up another camp and built houses. So we moved into a house and stayed for 3 years. We were in the refugee camp for 5 years altogether. Then the International Rescue Committee managed to place us in the United States. When my sister and I left Benin, we came to Oakland. In Jesus' name, Father, we thank you. In Jesus' name, Amen. I was traveling with my sister, Blessing. No one else. I didn't know anyone in California. Nobody. When I met the people from the International Rescue Committee, they took me to a hotel by Lake Merritt, where I spent my first night in America. The first thing I did when I woke up the next morning was pray a ton to thank God for making me succeed and be in America. We spent 2 days at the hotel before they found us a place by the lake on 9th Avenue. I stayed there for, I think, a year. At first, I was working with my sister in Park Plaza, cleaning hotel rooms and doing other jobs. It was too much for me. The work was so hard. But if you want something, you have to be disciplined. You pay a price for what you want. I have disciplined myself now for 5 years. Right now, I have no woman, no girlfriend. I don't smoke. I don't drink. After working as a hotel housekeeper, I went to work in the Oak Tree restaurant as a waiter. I worked so hard. I wanted to achieve more, so I went to nursing school and became a nurse. I also bought the house I live in 2009. And I've bought one other here in Oakland. I've been able to bring some of my other family over as well, and now there are 7 of us here from my family. I believe life is full of obstacles. I intend to step forward every day. That is what I hope for myself. What I hope for the Ogoni people is to have a dialogue for whoever is in power. If I could talk directly with Shell Oil and the Nigerian government, I would say, look, I know you are going to drill the oil, but you should have sympathy for the Ogoni people. You should show that you are human. I know everybody needs money. We are all Nigerian. Ogoni land. It's beautiful. Let's share it as equals. The Ogoni people have been through a lot of things. It's frightening to think what the Nigerian government wants to happen to the Ogoni, but we endure. In 1994, there were 500,000 people living in Ogoni. There's 1 million. But I keep telling people here, I am blessed. We are blessed. In Ogoni land, we have the resources so that everyone should have health.